What's the matter with Shedeur having a little bit of confidence in himself?
Nothing at all. Who could possibly have an issue with that?
This is what I don't like. Guys, you either like him and accept him for what he is. Don't pick and choose. All right? I don't like some of the conversation I'm hearing. And I've kind of made you out to be the bad guy here and there over something. Now, there's some things you've said that I've just flat out disagreed with when it's come to Shedeur Sanders.
And that's why it's a good show. Good back and forth. Good debate.
But honestly, I think that you kind of take him for what he is, and you either like the package or you don't like the package. Because there's a lot of things, like people saw the CBS post-game or the pregame, or, you haven't seen anybody like me, and that was off of 1 week of practice. Guys, this isn't Brian Bosworth out there. I just think that this is 2025, and he's a quarterback, for crying out loud. He's going to have some confidence in himself. He has to have confidence in himself, even to the degree of unrealistic confidence in himself. You have to.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a challenge to the team's coaches to harness that confidence and use it, but to also help him play within the system. So, like, when I hear, like, Jim Rome, I'm like, hey, you either like the entire package or you either like the entire package or I think you're saying some things you really don't mean.
Normally, fifth-round picks on 3 and 8 teams do not usually talk that much or at all. But then again, fifth-round picks on 3 and 8 teams generally are not the son of Deion Sanders. So I understand why this is a unique situation and a unique player, but let's maybe do a little more than just beat up on the pathetic Raiders before we start telling everybody how great we are and how legendary we are, and just give me a whole season of reps and then check back with me. The defense had nearly as many sacks as you completed passes, dude. So maybe we chill with the me stuff. And on some level, I get it. Like, I do want to see more. The Raiders are bum ass. They're a total disaster. Beating them doesn't really prove anything, no matter how badly some of you want it to prove that you were right once and for all.
That's Jim Rome on the Jim Rome Show on X. You're either with the entire package or you're not. And I think that there's a lot of us, we take calls. I've accused a lot of people living in the online world here recently because he does have fans that are completely devoid of reality. We all have fans. Every team and a lot of athletes do have a section of fans that are completely devoid of reality. But if I allow that to fester and linger in my head, then I'm going to start saying things about the player that isn't true. Legendary, hashtag is part of his brand. He has people that are around him that are business partners. He has people that are around him that do media. You're allowed to have that in 2025. Quarterbacks have that in college.
World has changed.
We're seeing something that's different now when it comes to college quarterbacking. I understand who his father is, obviously, but I do think that there are people who are looking at it where you also forgot that he also said in the postgame that he could have been better, and that this is a step forward for him. We missed that. So you see some of the stuff on CBS in the postgame with him and Tiffany Blackman where he's like, yeah, that was right after that. But he also talks about how he can be better. He also talks about taking those next steps. He also talks about being a good teammate. He also talks about his teammates' support. But when we pay attention to what's right there in one snippet, and then we see all the people going against what the NFL has said, I think it annoys us as radio show hosts. Because if you break it down one by one, like I asked our biggest rivals, guys who are opinionists, Bob Haney, Mo Egger, Chris Muller, they all, the thing about Kenny Pickett, Muller was the meanest. Mo Egger, Andy Dalton, you could say that's mean. Andy Dalton's had a long career in the NFL. Bob Haney said that he was passable, solid, that's what it was. And that's what he was. Passable, solid. When you have 3 days of practice, you're going to be passable and solid. And I think a lot of people looked at it and go, okay, where's the building blocks after this? Same thing I said, but I didn't think he was terrible. Nobody could say he was terrible. I think a lot of people were expecting terrible. I raised my hand. I thought that this was going to be a setup disaster from the offense. Not that they were setting him up for failure, but that they weren't going to be able to execute. Then he wouldn't be able to execute, and that he would be running for his life. I thought that this would still be a failure. I know the Raiders are terrible, but they're still pros, and you've still lost to a terrible football team because you're 3-8. So give credit where it's due for what they were able to accomplish together. You're not out of the woods by any means. In fact, you're just going into them. But I don't like putting words in his mouth, putting an attitude on his face that isn't there. I don't see it.
But there's no doubt.
I might have Browns blinders on. If the haters want to go out and call me out for that, fine.
No.
But I have not seen that, and you're not disagreeing with me.
There's no doubt he is different, right? Like, we can't deny that he has a different way about him, which is what I think makes him so unique. It's why I think he has the fan base that he has. You know, there are more... Look, him growing up with Deion as his dad, and also growing up with a lot of money, a lot of these other quarterbacks came up with nothing. That's going to change the way guys come off, and it's got to be up to Shedeur, right, to make sure that he is approachable with his teammates, and I haven't really seen that as an issue, in college or the NFL. I know there was the story Albert Breer was sharing that he would come to the games by himself and not with the team. That is a little weird. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it seemed like his teammates resented him in any way in Colorado.
I think some of these guys who become really famous when they're very young have some like child star syndrome where they maybe don't fully understand like how they come off. So, for example, there were all those rumors, I'm sure you guys remember from Colorado, where he was going to games separate from the team, right? Or like there were all these different things about like all this different stuff that was going on. And I'm not sure Shedeur ever knew like he was doing something wrong. I think he just kind of like that's been the life that he's lived because of who he is. And so I think sometimes with some of these guys, there can be a little bit of a lack of self-awareness, and that came off in the pre-draft process. And I don't think any of it is evil or dark or anything like that. But I can just tell you, from some of the people who dealt with him, he just had an air about him that he'd arrived. And again, like, I don't even know that that's his fault. Like, I just think that there's like a little bit of that. I'm the son of one of the most famous football players ever to put a pair of cleats on. And I've grown up in this environment where I've always been the biggest name and I've always been the show, and like carries himself that way. I think sometimes there's a little bit of like, are you even aware of the way that you're coming off?
That's Albert Breer on Afternoon Drive. I think the NFL, though, has a way of naturally humbling anybody if you think he needs to be humbled. How can I say he's been humbled? I don't know what Jacksonville State was before he got there, or Jackson State was before he got there. I imagine they weren't that great because they had to hire his father as head coach. So you raise the profile of Jackson State. Then you raise the profile of one of the most moribund programs in major college football. It was arguably the worst program in P4 college football. At that time, P5, because you still had the Pac-12. Like, we have to understand, he has had success at each of these levels. Now, people look at the overall record and go, again, they were a 1-11 football team before Travis Hunter, his father, got there. He's made an impact at every level. So there's two places that he's gone that has immediately raised the level of success and raised the profile of those places. The NFL is a different level of competition. And I think where it started to set in for him was the game against Baltimore, where he sat there on the bench after the game, where Rex Ryan ripped him for it. But I think it sat in going, this is going to be a lot harder than even you would ever realize. The NFL has that way of doing it. I don't need to humble him. You don't need to humble, and you're not calling for it. I don't think we need to humble him, guys. That's my problem.
Him being fourth string, Kenny. Fourth string. But I don't even think that'd be humiliating.
But I don't even think that's the humbling part. I think the humbling part is probably to come against better football teams, against the NFL, against teams that get you on tape, and then you'll have to answer to that.
But
and if he rises up over that, then we're going to have ourselves a franchise quarterback.
He was going to be a top 5 pick. Everybody around him was telling him top 5 pick. He goes to the 5th round. Then he's the 4th string for one of the worst teams in football. Like, that had to humble him to some extent.
That's true.
And here he is. Look,
but also
he's got the opportunity.
Also, you can say, I'm going to go in and I'm going to prove people wrong. Mm-hmm. And based on that, you're going to believe that you are doing that.
And that's what they all say nowadays. And look, the one thing that Albert Breer should also recognize is things have drastically changed. Like, child star or not, all these quarterbacks right now in college football at the major schools, they're all making 7 figures. Like, it's pretty crazy. They're all going to come into the league now with an air about them that is different from what, these quarterbacks from yesteryear came into the league.